to accept the recording, but I think we're more than ready to start. I feel like we already did. I would like to take just a couple of minutes just to introduce Echoes, and which is the reason why we're here today. Stephen, thank you again for what, a year and a half now to be collaborating and creating so much content and buzz around design leadership, and actually, making people think a little bit different. At least for the year and a half, I can tell you that the students are always like inspired and just thinking out of the box, just literally questioning status quo, even with design leadership, which is somehow still a new concept in a way. But we're here today with Fê Amarante and Sina. Fê, I'm so happy that you're also Brazilian. It makes me feel so belonging.
I was so happy to see your Google Slides in Portuguese.
Are they in are parts of them in Portuguese still?
No, the interface.
Oh, the interface. Yes, yeah. I know. Well, welcome, bem-vinda. Welcome, everyone. I don't know where you guys at. Please do me a huge favor. Let me know where you're joining us from, because we're reaching like globally, and I'm always curious to know where people are located, different cities. I'm in San Diego, even though I'm Brazilian. So please turn the chat where you're from. And Echoes, we are an independent global desirable futures lab. We have two business models, our Desirable Futures Lab and Echoes School, where design leadership live and is thriving. Our purpose is to foster the next generation of design leaders worldwide. And luckily, through design leadership and some other of our global courses, we are able to actually be moving forward to achieving our purpose. We're part of Global Design Thinking Alliance, and we are actually the only independent lab among all these big institutions conducting design research globally. So this is such an honor. I'm so proud to be part of it. And everything we do is through design. We believe in the power of design, and we believe that design can transform new realities and enable preferred futures. We combine design and business to transform organizations and society, I would like to say, even though that's pretty big, but it's true. And this is a little bit about the design leadership course. It's a 10-week journey that we outlined, and we broke down based on these 4 spheres here, which is to shape and manage design teams, to articulate the value of design, and Stephen Gates, the one talking mainly about this subject. And I would love, Steve, maybe if you could give a little bit of spoiler or tell us a little bit of what you've done before around this team for design leadership, build the next steps in the design leadership in your career, and excel the whole team, the whole company until the last mile of design. So those are the 4 pillars that we base the course for. And then we create this outline of 10 weeks, and all this information you'll find in the syllabus or the website. I'm not going to go in depth. This is the lineup, not the whole lineup, but some of the guests that are coming to speak for the master classes. And it starts on October 10th. So we have pretty much like 3 weeks until lecture starts. Again, this information is available on our website, and I am more than welcome to talk to anyone who has more questions. I remember Paul and I, by the way, we had a couple conversations last year in the beginning of the year, right, Paul? So thank you for being here again. If you want to talk about design leadership, or if you want to understand better the structure of the course, please reach out to me. Rafael, my colleague, he's also on the call here, and I'm sure he will also be happy to be talking to anyone who is interested. But today we are here, and Stephen will be guiding this conversation for us to know your perspective on the journey of design and resilience specifically. So I just want to sit down with my pen and paper right here in front of me. And Stephen, again, the stage is yours, and you know how to conduct the show. So
yeah, no, I think with this crowd, Braziliancy might have been actually the right way to say it too.
I know.
No, I didn't realize I'd even done that until after we did it. Faye makes me just want to get a better headshot. Like I got to admit, like it's just, you make me want to get a better headshot. So my name's Steve Gates. Yeah, so this will be the 3rd year that I'll be participating in Echoes. I've done it. This will be all 3 seasons. The last 2 years, my focus was really around articulating the value of design. we're going to evolve that this year. And the talk I'm doing is really around getting the C-suite to understand the value of design. That's come up a lot around how do you get leadership and how do you get a lot of your executives, your bosses, and things like that to take you more seriously. But I think whenever they said, look, do you want to do a fireside chat and what's the topic you want? I think there's not, I mean, look, for my own personal journey over the last 5 months, for the leaders that I talk to, resilience is a word that just comes up constantly. And so whenever I thought about that, like two of the most inspiring people, two of the most creative people I know came to mind with Faye and with Sina. And so I'm just like, have you guys introduce yourself. So we'll just go in order of headshots. So Faye, why don't you go first?
Hi, everyone. Faye, I'm Ranti. I right now am at Coca-Cola, so I lead design for North America, but have been in this in-house game since 2012 and have paved my path across different creative roles, have grown up really as a designer in Brazil because my dad is an architect. So I grew up drawing before I could really speak or walk. And I'm from Brazil. So to your point, I felt like there is Braziliancy in this call. And I'm a design leader, but I think as a human, I'm a doodler, drawer, artist, painter, all the things. So I'm super excited to be here. And I think your headshot is awesome, Stephen. And I think mine is, it doesn't really go with this whole like side view. Like I didn't really feel like I could do that. I think you could pull that off. So I think you should own yours.
I either have this or one that makes me look completely insane. Like I need something a little more subtle and emotive. I don't know. We'll figure that out. Sina, how you doing? I know you're coming. You're in Los Angeles today.
I'm in LA today. Yeah, that's right. I live in the Bay Area. Actually, it's funny. See, when you said you were trying to get two of the most creative people, I was like, oh, and then one of them fell through, and so you got.
I know.
I think that's great. That's great, man. I appreciate that.
So we'll add imposter syndrome to the
people.
conversation.
Well, because I know you know so many people. Yeah, my name is Sina. I live in the Bay Area in California. My foray into design is like probably many designers, like self-taught, paid a lot of college by making probably crummy websites and book covers and things like this. And then realizing it was actually a profession was incredible. And joined a company called IDEO. For those who aren't familiar, IDEO is a design firm, been around for a little while. And really that's where I really got obsessed with human-centered design. But I live in the Bay Area, so I also picked up the startup bug and being around a lot of startups. So joined a startup studio called Expa that was founded by the co-founder of Uber, Garrett. And his premise was, I can create a studio that wasn't VC driven and that wasn't, incubator, but rather maybe seasoned entrepreneurs who can be design driven to create their products. So, and by design, he meant human-centered design. And so was there for 2 years and then took on a project that was pretty exciting, which was how do you reimagine air travel in the modern age, but make it feel golden? So got to design some planes and the service that went along with it for him. And then, then joined this company called Medable. So, which has to do with decentralizing and making clinical trials inclusive. And the reason you can notice there's no thread of industry there. And I think it's the power of design to just solve problems. Like that's ultimately what it is how do you apply some fundamental principles of problem solving? And I got to do the product side as well as the brand side. And I have a very strong point of view how those two things should be way more married together than we're moving forward. So I get a lot of pushback and I get really a lot of from the product people and then from the brand people, but I actually fundamentally believe in the united version of design. And so, and I continue to do that in the work I do today. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think actually, Luna, let's go ahead and drop the slide. I think that way we all can see each other and do all that stuff. For anybody, so if you've been in one of my sessions before, you probably know this, but if you don't, so the way I usually run this is whenever you're on Zoom, it's always hard to know, is anybody listening? Do they agree with what you're saying? Anything like that. So if you're on camera and somebody says something you agree with, like just do that, right? Cover your camera with your hand. And it's such a simple thing to be able to do, but that way, you know, people are actually listening. But this is also meant to be interactive, right? So if we're talking about this stuff, if you have any questions, if you have anything, feel free to throw it in chat, come off mute, right? Like this isn't meant to be just sort of a one-way stodgy, just us talking. But that being said, let's start out with just us talking. So I guess we're here to talk about resilience, right? And I think for anybody who is a leader, this is an essential skill, right? I think, at least for me, leadership often means you don't get the luxury of having a bad day, right? Like you have to show up in like days like today, when all of a sudden, like, you know, the world is ending, you're, you know, Adobe bought Figma, all that stuff. You've got to show up and have a plan and have a way forward and make everybody believe that the sun will come up tomorrow. But I think we're also here to be honest and have a conversation around that takes a toll. And I think that sometimes that toll and what that is not discussed. So I guess, Sina, I'll start with you. Like what, I guess either what does resilience mean to you? What has it meant in your career? How do you think about it? I'll just keep throwing out very small, easy to answer questions.
Okay, I'll give you the evolution of resilience for me, because I think I misunderstood resilience as a young buck, and as I was going through it. I pictured resilience as toughness, and I pictured resilience as, in some ways, how much can I endure? And again, to your point, like just keep pushing through. And I wasn't completely off, but the spirit of it was off. I think for me, resilience is, and you're going to hear me talking, I know Faye's going to smile at this. I'm a student of Stoicism, so I love Stoicism. And I think they're obsessed with this concept of embracing the obstacle as the way. And that really is where it's not that the obstacle is resilience. I think that's the wrong way of thinking of it. So like I need to burn in order to be resilient, but rather, you know, you need a certain amount of qualities to get through that burning. And I think vulnerability is a part of that. I think letting your guard down is a part of that. And it's almost like counterintuitive. Melting on the floor and having a breakdown is part of being resilient, because it's just about embracing where you're at in the journey, especially as designers, because we were creative and we try to toughen ourselves up and feel like we don't have feelings. And I think it's more about how do you address those feelings as you're going through different ups and downs of the journey and not ignoring them, because I think that's the biggest detriment as far as I've learned. So for me, resilience is embrace the obstacles the way, and then know that you have to employ a lot of qualities of, I'll say, the heart, to be able to get you through that.
Faye, I can see that you have thoughts, and I know you and Sina are aligned on this.
You know, one thing that I have this vision as Sina started talking and immediately went there is like this notion that this old concept that I used to have of resilience was this like, you fall, you bounce back, you fall, you bounce back, you fall, you bounce back. And that's not really the experience that I feel is the most reflective of my current understanding and knowing of resilience. And I feel that there is a lot of, you fall and then you take a pause, and then that might take an hour, a day, a week. And then when you're ready, you would jump back on. And that pause and that ability to be in that might mean telling my team that I am really not focused because I miss my dad like crazy and I haven't seen him in 3 years. And this has been a week that has been very emotional for me. It could mean that we had tough news and as a team, we need to cope together with it. And it might mean that we see the end of the day and we see the light coming, the sun coming in the horizon, and we can then go there. But it's becoming more and more being able to, and that's, I think, headshot, Steve, with a hand here. One thing that I have learned is to like feel what feels right in that moment and actually go with that, and being able to answer to what the moment is bringing, and then responding with a non-cookie cutter version of an answer, to me, has become what resilience is. It's so that I can actually recover and then go on, and then recover and then go on, and then teach my teams how to recover and then go on instead of just muscling through it.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think one of the biggest things that I've learned, or I got really wrong in my career, what was, I think, like, one, a lot of leadership was having the answer. And I think I realized a lot of leadership is having a plan, not the answer.
Sure.
Right. It's like we for somehow, like, why is it whenever that's what we do with our creative process, that's what we do with our products, right? Like, we don't have the answer, we go through the process. But whenever it comes to leadership, we feel so driven that, like, I have to stand up and have the answer. And so I think some of it is accepting that, again, you need a plan, not necessarily the answer. But I think a lot of it for me also is just the fact of, for me, just honestly coming to grips with, I will continue to argue that I think leaders have imposter syndrome worse than anybody. Because in many cases, what I'm doing during the day, which is I'm looking at headcount, I'm looking at budget, I'm talking to executive, like, I'm pretty sure I went to art school to get away from all that shit, right? So, like, I'm doing a lot of stuff that is not core to my skill set, right?
Yeah.
So, like, there's a whole lot of stuff that I'm doing that I don't like. My support system and my support system probably isn't what it used to be, because now I have the big job and I'm too busy. Like, my boss wants results, my team want answers. So, like, I sort of have worked myself into this spot where I'm doing things that I'm not grounded in expertise in. I don't have the support system I need, right? I'm not talking to anybody about it. And, like, I think a lot of people, whenever they'll describe leadership as lonely, I think that's why it happens that way, because it is, and you're sitting there, and every leader, I swear to God, everyone I talk to is like, I'm doing it wrong. And because there is that, especially in creativity, right? Like, 2 + 2 isn't 4, it's burnt sienna, right? Like, there's not a clear way to be able to do that. And I think, on top of the fact that nobody ever acknowledges, no company ever prepares you for this. Like, nobody ever sort of mentions that, like, oh, everything that gets you to the point of leadership, yeah, sorry, most of those skills will have nothing to do with where you're going from there. And so that, and then, and so again, and I think, and nobody wants to stand up, right? Because, like, like today, everybody's tall and good looking and well educated, and their teams are well funded on social media, and nobody's like, I am really fucking this up.
Yeah, and there was this, someone posted this article from the Harvard Business Review today, and I came across, and I'm like, what a great day for this to show up, about how lonely leadership can be, and how much that loneliness and that aloneness can lead to burnout, and the isolating factor of being in this position that we're in can be just on top of everything, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I remember working with my VP of brand creative, and we're just having a meeting about someone. It might have been a talent thing. I don't even remember the issue, but I remember at one point we were quiet, and he's like, what? And I was like, do you remember when we used to design things? Like, that wasn't that cool when we used to design things? And it was just a laughing moment, because it's really not that design went away. And of course you're giving guidance and things like that, but there is a longing for what you got into it in the first place, which is the making of it, right? It's the makerness of it, the creativeness of it, the vulnerability, the not knowingness of it. And almost as a design leader, you almost need the exact opposite skills to help create the facilitation of all those things, of creating a space where people can, like, wander. Like, you need structure for people to wander. You need to have definitive paths in order to be able to challenge those paths, but you don't get to be the one directly always doing that, but creating a space for others. And you miss it. You start to miss it, and you're like, what am I doing? What am I even doing anymore? Like, I used to be able to, and you're really good at the challenging. You're really good at the ambiguity part, not necessarily this other side of things, which is what MBAs get prized for, right? Like, they're the ones who raise your hands first. They're the ones who have the answer first. Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. And designers, by their very nature, are successful by not doing that. I remember this quote that Einstein once said. He said, it's not that I'm smarter than everyone else, it's just that I stay with the problem longer than everyone else. And I think that's the thing. Like, people get really uncomfortable with not knowing for a long time, and they want to answer. And that's the growth marketer, right? That's the product guy who has a deadline to ship something. It's not the designer wants to do the right thing. And they're like, no, we're not there yet. We need to be patient. And I think those tensions are good, but it's hard to remain that way when you're a leader and accountable with those same metrics that your colleagues are rewarded for in marketing and in product and things like this.
Well, no, and I think, look, I think it's a good call out, right? Because I do think, one, the cruelest irony is, I think the longer you're in this industry, the more it pulls you away from what you love. And it's like an act of will to stay as a designer, an act of will to sort of stay engaged in that. But it is, and I think that is just sort of the other part of it is, I do think, we have to acknowledge that creativity and corporate structure don't like to coexist, right? I think there was, again, a friend of mine, Greg Larkin, wrote a book called This Might Get Me Fired, where he just said, look, the only way that the innovation most companies want is possible has to be through basically through guerrilla warfare, guerrilla means, because you can't almost do it through that regular way of working. And I think that also takes a burden. And I think, Faye, were you the one that said this, where it's like, we're sort of at this moment where it's like, we learn business, but they forgot to learn design?
Oh yeah, we were talking about, so we had like a whole pre-fire session and it was really good. So yeah, I just feel, and it's because I'm seeing that Moira is in the attendance, and she was the one that hired me at Hershey when I was a baby design manager in 2012. And and I remember vividly sitting in her, there's a table at this office there, and we're talking about it, and I remember her saying, this is basically like a startup in a giant company, because no one understands what we're doing here. And you have to basically just have the appetite for a lot of this kind of slip and fall. And I didn't quite understand that until I got into it. Because leadership inside of an in-house organization in a company is a totally different ballgame as an agency. Any one agency wanting to go in-house, mark my words. So I think we got from this, my journey has been from this place of, we as design leaders have been all talking about, we need to evangelize organizations on the importance of design, the key aspects of design, and how design is core to the business, and we have to learn how to speak business. I have an MBA. I don't talk about people's spreadsheets or balance sheets, but and we have to empathize with the business side of things. But at this point, I'm almost wondering what is the flip side of, what does an organization need to learn to actually be able to foster a design capability? What is the give from the organization side on, okay, I want to incubate this group of really odd people that their entire existence is to challenge everything, to be pains in the asses, to be talking about every single thing from the other side of everything, and they're divergent, they're all kinds of different. How do I, as a company, as an organization, as a marketing, as a business structure, actually create some of the basic rudimentary tools for me to actually be able to foster this organization? And that has been my most current questioning is, what are the organizations actually doing the opposite effort, actually getting basic education around design so that they can speak to us? In the same way that we've been so hard pressed at learning business and understanding how to talk about EBITDA and margins and looking at spreadsheets and looking at annual reports and all of that, what is the countermeasure to that?
Well, I guess, Sina, you and I met whenever you were at IDEO, and we had IDEO come into City to try to figure that out. So I guess I'm curious, for your perspective, what works, right? Either what are the things that we can help our companies do? What are the things that we can do as leaders? What are those things that you've seen that actually work?
Yeah, it's I wish I could say it was super, super successful. I think we were successful maybe 10% or 20% of the time, but there was definitely, especially when we're trying to do transformation, because there's a lot of things at play. I think there's qualities that are almost seem counterintuitive in the beginning, like trust. So you need executive trust to be able to do what you need to do as a designer, because you're actually asking sometimes some people to slow down, sometimes go in with something without not knowing what the end result was. Trusting, they need to trust that you will actually give them something better than it was before, that letting go. It's almost you're going against inertia, right? Or loss aversion, which is, if I give up this to you, what am I going to get that's twice as valuable? And I think really, practically speaking, it's having something practical. It's not solving with a new problem, not coming up with a brand new idea that's shiny and really great. It's actually taking the most shitty problem that they possibly have and fixing it with design. So let me give you 2 examples. One is a company that can go in, this is no marketer wants to hear, I want to have growth metrics on my, marketing growth measures that are better than before. Because what that really means is shitty, bright colors that people like to click on and all this stuff. But the reality is, if you can fix that in an elegant way, could you produce the type of clicks, something that's clickable, but that still is beautiful and elegant and still is honoring design. That's your challenge. It's not that it's either or, like be high design or get the cheap clicks or whatever, not on that side. On the product side, it's the same thing. What's the argument that you have to make towards extending the timeline because you haven't gotten to that right answer yet? And that all comes down to this kind of trust thing. And this is a stupid story, but I'll share. There was a client we had. It was I can say it now. It was the president of Comedy Central. And so this is many years ago, where the Viacom was fighting them not to put things on social media and on YouTube and going digital because they were losing out on all those dollars, right? And so the president was like, nah, this doesn't feel right. Everyone who's working for me is saying everyone's putting their stuff up on YouTube anyway. How do we make this work? So they came to IDEO, and IDEO was like, hey, what are you going to do to think different? What are you going to do that's absolutely going to be challenging the status quo? There's nothing I could rationally tell this person that would cause that to happen. So we went out to dinner the first night we had a kickoff. And this is where design comes in. That's not design. So I created a space where we had permission. So we went to some restaurant, some New York restaurant or whatever not. And I don't know, this is where I've lost this probably. I was much more ballsy back then, but I told the waiter, I was like, waiter, I want everything on this appetizer menu, but I would like to ask your chef to bring something to surprise us, wow us. And he's like, well, the chef doesn't really make stuff he hasn't designed. I was like, just ask. We have a very special guest here. They're really important and incredible. Can you just do that for me? Now, big risk, could have been something cheesy, like he could have given us like cheese puffs. I don't know. He could have done whatever. And he brought out this dish. And I was like, oh, so what's this dish? CEO is pretty impressed at this point. I was like, yeah, I'm doing really good for myself. He's like, oh, well, he took chicken hearts and he sliced them and he made this certain dish, blah, 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 from where he's from. Now, I mean, I had to like grab the food and eat it. I don't eat heart. I've never had it in my life. I think I blacked out while I was eating it. But in that moment, all of this is to say, I mean, this is the work of design leadership. It was about creating, like, almost my design was, how do I build more trust? How do I use creative ways of building trust in a rapid period of time? So IDEO, what it does is through storytelling primarily, and through legacy and through experiential aha moments, creates a window of tolerance, I'll call it, for those who are familiar with psychedelics. But we create this window of tolerance where people can experience something that gives them a sight for something down the line. And they say, okay, we give you permission to disrupt our business. Now, if I were to have approached that from a business perspective or whatever, I would have lost it. And I think that's the part that I would say is difficult as a designer, as we learn the language, like as Faye was saying, we learn the language of business. Like, it's actually, we're giving up what our superpower is. Like, what they want from us is the magic show. You don't hire a magician to be a caterer, right? Like, you hire a magician to do magic. And so design is the same way. Like, yes, it kind of freaks them out a little bit. Yes, it kind of makes them feel uncomfortable a bit. But I think keeping that confidence in that sense of like, hey, I need to bring the integrity of design to this, and I might get a little bit of backlash. I think that's what we were hired for in the first place. So I'll pause there. I'll say that's what if I were to notice the landscape of IDEO, its magic was creating that bridge of trust in a very short and intense period of time. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, no.
Steve got muted.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So Sina, I would say we could actually stay with that for just 1 second longer. Because one of my favorite things you've ever said of all time was how you described innovation as like Super Mario Brothers.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's true. Are y'all familiar with Super Mario Brothers, the video game?
And if you're not, I think we should.
I don't know. I don't even know if it's politically correct anymore. It's this little Italian guy, and he's a plumber, and he's little, and he's very vulnerable. Like, even this he's lame. He's like, turtles will kill him. Like slow turtles kill this little guy. So the most vulnerable motherfucker on the planet. Talk about designer. And his goal is to survive. Right? His goal is to survive. Now, here's the deal. There's this thing in this game, it's kind of weird. It's a glowing flower and it pulsates. And if you eat this flower, sounds so weird. It sounds like it's a psychedelic food. If you eat this flower, it gives you the power to grow and shoot fireballs. So you become pretty powerful. You went from being nothing to this pretty powerful being. Now, I think a lot of times what designers end up doing is they try to get people to eat this flower. Hey, there's this flower and it's glowing and it looks like this. You should definitely eat it. And most people we're talking to are like, I don't want to eat a flower. That sounds weird. Like, I've been told my whole life not to do that. Why are you trying to get me to eat a flower? Instead, we flip it on its head and say, hey, you know what sucks when a turtle bites you and you die? Yeah, I hate that. Wouldn't you love it if you could like not die? Yes. Wouldn't you love it if you could actually have fireballs and kill those turtles? Yeah. Okay, there's this thing I have that can do just that. I didn't have to go into the craft of design and the elegance of this and that and design systems and stuff like that. It was just that. It was the impact that they wanted to see. Now, as a designer, I care deeply about the flower and the petals and all that stuff. But it's that divorcing of I can maintain my passion for something without someone having to share that passion in order for us to share the impact of that passion. I don't know if that made sense. I'll say it again. No one has to, my passion doesn't need to be shared by someone else having that passion in order for it to have impact in the world. And I think that's somewhere where we get bummed out as designers, is when we see people aren't as excited about design as we are. We go, well, then they don't want what I have. But actually they do. They just don't want to go through all the work. Just like Faye's dad, most of his people, they don't want to see him go through slaving different drafts and diagrams and angles and this. They're like, just give me a beautiful house. I want it to, at the end, I want to walk in and I want all my friends to be like, holy shit, this is a dope house. Who built it? That guy. That's it. And I want to get hired by him again. So I mean, that's my take on a lot of times selling design in-house as well as out-house, is you just have a new communication. It's not as fun, but it's a craft.
The other thing that is kind of cool too, that designers are specifically suited for, is we have to keep our weirdness, or else again we become this like blob of grayness inside of the company, and it just gets really boring, really blobby, and just, well, no one wants to do that. So I am shocked by how many times I am in most senior person in the company, least senior person in the company, but someone in the business side. And the moment you drop the trying to speak business with them, or even trying to speak design with them and just speak human, I am shocked at the number of times that is all you need to just dissolve all of the distances. So a lot of times it is really talking about like, hey, I really think that this group of people is really insecure and a little afraid of X and Y and Z. So if we know and we assume the fact that they're a little insecure and a little afraid of X and Y and Z, how might we join forces and make the story about the reasons or the end of the tunnel where fear and insecurity won't really be an issue, so that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel? We're not talking about design. We're not talking about business even. We're talking about more empathy and a little bit of compassion, I feel, because a lot of times there are those, innovation wants this, I hate them. It's like, there's just like this whole thing. And if instead of we're like, putting the design and the innovation and the marketing and all the people like this, if it's becoming us talking about the thing and trying to dissolve into it all the humanity that goes into, to Steven's point, like, we're all here feeling imposters. My hand is clammy and cold right now. I still get cold hands every time I speak about literally anything in front of any crowd. Could be 5,000, could be 500, could be 5 people. And if we just assume that they're all there with their humanity and their security and their fears and all of that, how much of that is actually a design skill of empathy and understanding and putting yourselves in the shoes? So to what Sina's talking about, I feel that there is an incredible amount of skill that goes into that maybe is the common language that we're talking about that dissolves a little bit of that.
I have no clue how to follow up any of that. Look, because I think, but look, it is, right? And I think that's, I'll definitely say, I think, sometimes we get caught up in maybe a little too caught up in how we're different and we forget how we're the same. Because look, I mean, I'll always believe that like everyone is creative, just most people forgot.
Oh yeah.
That, you go look at any group of kindergartners, again, everybody's creative. It's just, we're sort of the kids that survived. Because I think when everybody else said, oh, that's not a real profession, or you can't really sort of make a living at that, none of us sort of listened too well. So I'm gonna leave some time to open it up to questions. Well, I guess, yeah, Kristen, go ahead. What do you got? Well, maybe not.
I think she dropped off.
Okay.
But I think what she's saying and what the both of them were saying, Steve, and it's something that you mentioned a couple of times during the masterclass, which is sometimes just using a word that makes everybody scary, it's enough to make them feel like they are against each other when literally they are trying to speak the same language. But because we're
Yeah.
using a word that it's scary, no one wants to say, oh, okay, I'm gonna let go, because otherwise that team is winning or whatever.
Yeah, no, I definitely think, and again, I've talked about this a lot recently. I mean, I think one of the, I mean, again, it's not really a joke, but I've talked about this for a long time, that like, if you ever want to scale design and you want to scale your leadership, don't ever call what you do design. You know, again, like whenever I scaled design at Citibank, it was called, you was seen it, right? It was a discovery mindset. It wasn't design. Because I think we need to realize that there's power and liability in the word design. Because I think for us, when we say design sprint, design thinking, design system, we see these as methodologies. We see these as tools. We see this as being inclusive. We see this as ways to get ideas. I think if you, in the current state of a lot of companies, too many people see the word design in those phrases as a claim of ownership or a claim of minimization, right? That either this is something that design is going to take over and they're going to run our process, which if you've ever actually done design thinking or done a design sprint, you know, is absolutely not what happens. Again, a design system can only exist with engineering, but I think in a lot of cases, that's what you see is just too many people start to see it as a claim of ownership, you know, or they just see design in the executional sense. So I think sometimes even that word can kind of become a little stigmatized with what it means. But so before we throw it open to questions for everybody, I guess for Faye and Sina, whoever wants to go first, like what are the things that you've been doing lately that are working, that are helping you be able to come back to be able to deal with these challenges, to be able to like show up for your team, be able to show up for yourself, right? Like, what are those things that you're doing that have been working?
Therapy.
True. Yeah. That's a good one. Therapy, executive coach.
But aside from that,
Crying. Snuggies, no. Tear sessions, watching a lot of Lord of the Rings and just losing myself. No, that's great. Faye, you want to go? I'll defer to
Sure.
you. I'll defer to you.
I think the biggest thing for me, and even this conversation here, but in general, this can be being in this position, and you know, it's not a martyr kind of thing. Like it's, you know, we chose to be here for reasons, but it can be pretty isolating. So one of the things that I have been more intentionally doing is just building a network of people that I can talk with and just, I mean, screaming to a text message sometimes, but other times just talk through things, because no matter what company I've worked for, no matter what teams I've led, no matter what size of project, no matter what it is, at times, at split pieces of time, it's felt like, oh my God, this is so absurdly complicated. There has to be someone else either dealing with something like this, or am I alone doing it? So I've been more meaningfully reaching and building a constant community of practice, if you will, because otherwise, to your point, Stephen, what's really tricky is that my boss, she wonderful, but she's not a design leader. She is a generalist. And a lot of times, like when we get into certain positions, like you're not talking anymore within a design community. A lot of times you're within a different community of well-intended, wonderful humans that really don't understand the pain that we're in. So empathy is really important, and being able to like be compassionate with one another is really important. So community. And then a thing that has been relatively recent is I've been ruthless about my boundaries, in the sense of being very specific about communicating to my team in very black and white ways, but also communicating to myself in very black and white ways, because what I think 2020 brought to me that was a wake-up call was that there is one source of battery for Faye, There is no 2, 3, 4. I don't have a work source of battery separate from a personal source of battery, separate from the Fada likes doodling and painting source of batteries. It's one. And if that goes bonkers, if that goes to zero, I have literally nothing for anything, including myself. And that's not the best way for me to show up to this role, to what I do. I am my worst if I show up in that way. I am not helping anyone. I am not supporting anyone. I am not building anything. So those are, I think, among other things like therapy, those are the biggest things that seem really basic. And I think all of us, I think we've read a bazillion different books, listened to a gazillion different podcasts, have heard a million different pieces of advice of those few things, but it took me years to actually put them in practice and own them, because I'm the only one that can do it. There's no coaching that can coach me into doing this if I don't do it.
Sina, how about you?
That's so good. That was so good. Yeah, let me think about this for a second. So I'll say this to caveat. I know it's being recorded. Half the things I want to say, I don't want to say because it's being recorded. But anyway, I'll say some of them at least. So I had a colleague at IDEO, and he was from a place where it was very like a lot of like gusto and just didn't give a shit and said what he wanted to say. In fact, 100% would not be acceptable today. But one thing he said is like, there's a Venn diagram of the type of people IDEO attracts. And I was like, what's that? And I was expecting something. He's like, super talented people, like in their skill set. And I was like, okay, I expect that. And he goes, and the most insecure people ever of all time. He's like, because I asked him, I was like, why is it that more people from IDEO who are exposed to all these ideas aren't inventors, aren't the entrepreneurs? Like, we don't actually have that many entrepreneurs. They're all consultants. And he said, and this type of insecurity probably is not just IDEO. It's probably like a lot of designers. And I'm going to flip that on its head a little bit. I think creativity in general is a vulnerable act. Creativity is the ultimate act of vulnerability, right? And I'm not saying you have to cry or get mushy about it, but it is a part of yourself that you have to get uncomfortable with to create some of the best work of your life, right? In fact, I'll even say this, the most inspired designers that you look to are probably not design leaders. They're designers. Like Johnny Ives did not manage people. He had people who managed people, right? People that Paul Rand, all these brand people, they were eventually stayed in that. They're like, I'm just going to be the principal designer. I'll hire a bunch of other people. They're designing all the time, because taking them out of that vulnerable space probably leads them to doing less great work. That's the reality of design leadership. I know it's very not popular, but I think you're not going to do your greatest design work as a design leader, especially executive level. That's a harsh thing to say. I think it's okay if you embrace the fact that I want to give an opportunity for others to do some of their best work, because I believe that I'm not the only one who could do great work. So it's a little bit more of a humility play on that side. A couple of things, I think you touched upon something, Faye. I'll say three things that I think 100% this last gig I had killed me as a designer, crushed me. But there's three things I was forced to do. And I think you touched upon one of them, Faye, which you said it in jest, but it's really taking care of your mental well-being and your mental wellness. 100%. We're so vulnerable that we get beat up probably twice as much as the guy who's crunching numbers in Excel sheets, because you're exposing yourself every single time if you're actually doing good work, and that you're letting that kind of poison in. If someone is discontent, you feel it twice as much. So one is mental wellness is for sure. I'm a big advocate of it. Two is I call it a cadre. So I literally created an app idea around this and sold it to the Players Association of NFL. Three people that you need in your life. You can make it more, but there's three people that you'll need to surround yourself to be really successful at yourself. The first one I call it is the booster or cheerleader, whatever not. Someone who is constantly your cheerleader when you're down that you can reach out to. Their pure motive is not to fix any problem, but to say, man, oh man, you're good, or man, girl, you're doing fantastic, whatever not. Steve, to me, a lot of times is that cheerleader. So I'll write and I'll say, I feel like shit. I don't feel like I'm a great designer. I don't feel like I've done anything well. What the hell am I doing with my life? I'm like, and he'll be like, no, man, are you kidding me? You're amazing. So that's the first one, is find yourself a booster and ask them to be that. Like time and time I reach out to you. I just need you to uplift me. The second person is what I call the coach. Find someone that you admire as a designer, the work that they're doing in the world, and meet with them like you're their apprentice. There's a reason why apprenticeships lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. We threw that out of the water with institutional knowledge, but the reality is, call it a mentor, call it whatever. Find someone and be on them. Tell them, say, what do I need to do? Like, how else can I grow? What else can you tell me? And they might help you, they might not, but keep finding that person. So a mentor, coach person. The third one is an accountable person. So this is only if you want to keep growing, right? This is like, know what you're getting yourself into. If you really want to get on a trajectory of leadership, you need someone who's going to keep you accountable. What are you doing to improve your skills today? What are you doing to take care of yourself? Have you looked out and reached out to someone to learn? Are you doing stuff with your team that you haven't thought about? It's just accountable, like check in on them, set your goals and have like, I recommend SMART goals and have someone you can spot it to. So those three things I do religiously, 100%. I don't like doing any of that stuff. I am not an organized person. It's exactly why I do it. So first one, mental health. Second one is this cadre idea. And then the third one, I wrote it down here because I thought I might forget it. I got it now. Yeah, is creating, so the third person is the accountability person. So make sure that you get your goals done. If you have a timeline, you did it. If you're like, I'm going to sign up for this awesome class that's being hosted by Echoes, then you're actually going to sign up for it, that kind of thing. So that's the third person. So the third one is actually something you can do for others. 100%. I can't emphasize this one enough. As much as you need to take, you're going to get more by giving. And so here's what your design, someone mentioned something about junior designers. Boy, junior designers are, what a racket, right? Like it's crazy. Like it's the hardest group of people to play with because they have so much energy, but can get so dispirited so quickly. Like you give them one critique and they're like, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore or whatever not. And I think the problem with, I call them junior designers, is that they can't get out of their own way in terms of like design school. Like they're still thinking in terms of pixels and they're not thinking in terms of purpose, right? So helping them elevate out of that, say, hey, I love what you did here. If you were to reframe this as what would be the brief with what you wrote, what would that look like? Coaching younger designers to help them think about like the problem set, that's for them, that's one. Medium level people, so medium level designers or just designers, if you will, it's really about keeping them inspired. So I was the idea. So the third category I'm talking about is like giving. The first one is junior designers. Short answer is get them to think about the problem. It's really, or design thinking, right? They're still pushing pixels, get them to think not pixels. Number two is middle designers. They need to be inspired the most because they're now ICs that have skill set, but they're not bumping heads with, they're getting a taste for bureaucracy. They're getting a taste for weirdness and things like that. And I remember sitting across like a diner table because I was really bummed out one time. I was at IDEO at the time and I was just kind of like in a funk. And he noticed that he was a chief creative officer at IDEO at the time. Paul Bennett is his name. And he said, let's go out for breakfast. We sat across the table from one another. I'm eating my oatmeal and, he's eating some sort of whatever thing. And he says, so what's going on, Sina? I was like, I don't know. I kind of feel bummed out. I kind of feel like I'm in a rut. I don't really feel, like I'm fueled by anything. He's like, what are you doing to get inspired? I was like, oh, I don't know what you mean. I'm not really inspired right now. That's what I was just trying to tell you. And he said, no. I'm asking you, what are you doing to get inspired? And he said, oh, Sina, as a designer, it's your job to be inspired. Like you fundamentally have to treat it like you would work, like just like an athlete considers doing his morning run part of his performance when he goes play. You need to be inspired when it comes time to deliver, like to show up in a client, to start designing, you have already been doing the workout for it. So be inspired. And that's kind of the simple stuff. You guys all know this because you've done it. Like walking through, I call it the blitz run of a museum. Do like 15 minutes of walking through a museum. I think our senses pick up on all that stuff no matter what anyway, and it opens us up again. So I think getting them to do that kind of stuff, watch a documentary, send them like YouTube clips of cool shit like a Johnny Ives talk or like what Vitsu is doing with their furniture. It's like nerdy stuff, design nerdy stuff. I think that's really important to do for middle level designers, senior designers, the hardest. This is the hardest because now they're suffering like we're suffering. They're suffering from like, I hate managing people. I don't want to manage people, but I need to. I just want to do the work myself. This person's not getting it. I can knock this out in 2 hours. It's taking them 3 days. This is the pivotal point of being a mentor. And I think I'm going to refer to everything Faye has said, which is that's when you show your vulnerability. And that was the biggest mistake I made in my career, is not showing the reports right under me that I'm vulnerable as well. I felt like they want me to make decisions. That's for sure. That's without a doubt, you just need to make decisions and have direction. But to show them and say, man, I really struggled with making sure everyone's uplifted and everyone's really great, but I'm going to try to do something. I'm going to try to do a 1 day, let's share ideas of our favorite places we traveled. Telling them your thought process of how you're inspiring the rest of the team or how you're bringing the team together is the best modeling you can do for them. So I know that was a lot, but I think the last one is my saving grace, because when I feel like a shitty designer, at least I'm like, well, at least I care about people. At least I'm not a shitty human. So I feel that that's my go-to. The second one, which is all about having this cadre, is really important. I can't emphasize that enough. I know, Steven, I don't know if you told them about your Creative Avengers group. It's like 20 people like that meet every Friday to talk about creativity and stuff. I mean, I don't know. And it's just having that peer group. And the first one is mental health. I just want to let you know, like, it's definitely worth getting a therapist. If you don't want to get a therapist, at least an executive coach. Doesn't solve the problem, but they can work through the hard problems with you. Like, I don't know, I feel like really insecure about my leadership style right now, and they'll just pump you up. So,
you know, I'm itching to say something, because your 1, 2, 3 inspired me to just maybe cover the piece that is probably the most important and the most what has been working for me the most heads down, is to be as much of who I am at every place I am, regardless of how intimidating that place is. So,
it's hard.
I cannot even tell you how many times I got almost in tears while COVID was happening, because people in my team were dropping left and right saying, hey, I am scared shitless. I don't know what's happening. I am afraid for my fill in the blanks, grandma, father, kids, whatever. And you know how easy it is for a leader, or for a lot of leaders, to say, oh, but we're going to get through this. It's going to be fine. And back then I was like, I don't know if we're going to get through this. I am scared shitless too. I am actually horribly terrified. And if I'm really, really being honest with you, on a scale from 0 to 10, I'm at a solid 2 right now. And I haven't ticked up to 3 or 4 in 6 months, because the mental strain of this whole fucking thing has been horrifying. And something then it wasn't planned, because I was doing what I could with what I had, because no one prepared us for what was going to happen back in March of 2020. There was no script for that. And I think back then, what I've been continuing to practice is this: I have a dog, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I am recovering from trauma, I'm going to therapy, I'm devoting myself to art, I am stumbling upon things, I am fucking it up a lot of times, I am apologizing when I do, I am giving people feedback that I wish I had been given when I was younger in my career. I'm doing all of those things, making a whole bunch of mistakes, and being present in all of them, regardless if I'm talking with my CFO, if I am talking with someone in the brand team, if I'm talking with someone in the industry. And that is the most horrifying thing, yet the most rewarding thing that I have been doing as a leader, because it's actually been giving me a lot of permission, so that I don't have to put the mask of design leader when I'm a leader, and then take the mask off, and then put the mask of human when I'm a human, take the mask off and put I'm just one. And that is way less laborious than being a lot of people. And no one told me that when I was growing up in my career. No one really told me, hey, like, if you stop trying to be 5 or 6 personas and you just consider and focus on being just who you are, it's not going to be vanilla ice cream for everyone. There's a lot of people that are going to fucking hate it. You're not going to be for everyone, and that's fine. And that's kind of like how life is. And that's design. Design is not for everyone. Whatever you create is not going to be everything that everyone loves, but that's kind of the point. And I wish I had known that earlier in my career. And even sharing this, oh my God, like, you all, like, my hands is like freaking freezing, like ice picks at the end of my fingers.
I mean, look, I'll continue to argue. I think, especially in leadership, showing up as your authentic self is one of the most courageous and rebellious acts there is, right?
And
because
horrifying.
it's so easy to be like, because I know there are so many leaders who I know who hate their position, who hate where they are, and it's because they've shown up for so long, showing up as who they want, who they think people want them to be, not as who they are, right? Because a lot of times it's easier. You just float around. The only thing I'll contribute, and at least I'm happy to stay on to answer questions or whatever. The couple things I'll say that I've done that worked really well. One, Sina mentioned, I've been extremely deliberate in creating a support system. So the first Friday of every month, there's a standing invitation for the 50 to 60 smartest, funniest, most creative, best leaders, right? Like all the people who like, again, I respect the most to just come and hang out for an hour. And
cool.
usually for every one of those meetings, about 20 of them show up. And if things are going great, we celebrate it. If things are falling apart, we rush in to help. We sort of normalize whatever's going on, but there's at least a place in being deliberate of saying, how do we get together? How do we talk about what's going on? Right. I think another one was, this helped me a lot. And it took me a really long time to figure this out. And I think you can sort of use the words that you want. I got really good at understanding the difference between happiness and joy. Because what I realized was far too much of my career was about trying to be happy. And what I would often do is I would think about that if I launched this product, if I got this job, if I did this thing, got this car, like did whatever it was, right? Like too much of my life was about, if I did this, then I'll be happy. So it was about a target, right? If I accomplish this, then I'll be happy. Well, the problem was that even whenever I did it and it was great, I would be happy for like 24 to 48 hours. Then my brain would recalibrate, set a new target. So it was this like little spike with a long valley and a little spike with a long valley. And like whenever you got there, it never lasted, right? So it was always this feeling of inadequacy, it was never enough. So I think a lot of what I've tried to do is to shift my perspective on work and everything else to be about joy, right? Like, what do I do every day? How do I show up every day? What do I do every week, right? Like what Sina said, every Friday for an hour and a half, I do mentoring sessions on the Amazing Design People List because I love to give back, right? Like, what are those things that consistently bring me joy? Because whenever my entire existence and my career was target based, I constantly felt inadequate and it just wore me out, right? Like that.
So good.
That was something that I think for me really caused me to sort of think about that stuff differently. And I think the last one is, and I think we've all sort of hit on it, right? Like, how do you find the places, the people, the whatever it is to be vulnerable? Because I think like one of the biggest things as a leader that you have to manage is what I'll describe to myself as like a hope economy, right? What is giving me hope? What is filling me up? Like for me, the last 5 months of being laid off, of searching for a job, is one of the most dehumanizing, demoralizing, frustrating, fucked up and like where it is 99% rejection. It is a siege on believing in yourself, right? And so I think a lot of what that was really, how are you making sure there are things to look forward to? How are there things that you're doing? It's like you said, like Sina, like it's like that athlete who's going out there. And I think it's not just around inspiration, but it is looking and thinking like, what are those things that you look forward to, that you want to participate in, that you find inspiring, right? Like what are the, and be deliberate about them. Because I think for too many of us, we leave our creativity, our happiness, our inspiration up to like happenstance, like, oh, it'll happen. And then when it doesn't, we're like, why isn't it? So yeah, I just think being more deliberate with that's something I've done a ton of work around. And also just whenever it happens to, like, yeah, just say it out loud, right? Because I think that's the other thing that I've discovered is whatever you think you're going through, however isolated you think you are, whatever that is, like, it's amazing when you get a group like this together and say, I'm going through this, how everybody else is like, oh my God, thank God somebody said it. But I don't know. I mean, I'm if we want to stick around and answer some questions or whatever that is, because I know we're a minute or two past, but like I said, I'm happy to hang out if people have questions or there's stuff we want to talk about. If there are questions.
I was just going to say one of the things that, you know, as listening to everything, you know, and I can relate to all of these comments. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so demonstrate that essence inside vulnerability and to really project empathy with action, and that's across every level. To the extent that, you know, you are empathizing with the pain that a CFO is going through, you're empathizing with the pain a junior designer is going through, and then you action an outcome for that individual in context to what they need. Without using any of the buzz terms, without using any of the lingo, you are just there for that person in that moment. And I think if you can show up like that consistently and create a narrative around that, not only will people, you know, see you as a valued colleague, but you'll start to build a series of trusted relationships. And that's taken me a long time to develop after, you know, years of working corporate agency consultancy. It is friggin' hard. It is friggin' hard because, you know, do you really want to support someone who kicks you in the balls? It's really, really hard. But if you can put the ego aside and put the whole, well, I'm a designer, I know better. If you can put all that aside and say, well, maybe this person's angry because of something I don't know. Maybe this person's sad because of something I haven't seen or I haven't heard or I haven't understood. So I'm just going to listen. And whenever I'm in a meeting, I use a fantastic quote that a former mentor said to me, and it's 3 before me. And it's a listening quality that, you know, you don't aim to be the loudest person in the room, despite your knowledge or experience. You aim to position yourself as it relates to 3 before me and listen to other people first, listen to their tone, observe their behavior. And you might just find out something unique that changes your entire perception of that individual. So, but yeah, thank you for all your comments. Yeah, you know, Sina, Faye, Stephen, awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Thanks, Paul.
Any questions? Any burning things anybody's wanting to ask? Safe space. Everybody keeps getting a little smaller.
Or it gets bigger, right? The faces are getting bigger.
That's true.
I think it's important to mention that conversations like this, and I'm glad that Stephen is here to prove that this is what happens during those 10 weeks. And I just, yes, I need to talk about this, but also because I truly believe in what we're doing, and to hold a safe space where a lot of people, because they feel isolated and lonely through the process, then they feel like they are heard and they are belonging in a group of people that most likely have the same issues or the challenges. And then finally someone there to listen, to share, and to maybe solve together for it, which I think it's the good side effect of the course itself. And what I would love to say is that if the three of you, Faye, Stephen, and Sina, if you are welcome to people, maybe send later questions on LinkedIn or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to create community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think yeah, being more outspoken and you know, helping people out has not been on any of our development lists for quite a while. So yeah, I think that's why I love the masterclass, and I keep coming back and doing it, is because I think the Slack community and sort of the cabal and the group that gets formed is really great. But yeah, I think for any of us, I know any follow-ups, any other questions, anything else, feel free to reach out. I know we're all more than happy to help.
Yes. And for those who are still here, there's a 20% discount. If you send me an email saying that you are interested. I'm not going to put a coupon code or anything because we need people to be more proactive. So if you are interested, I'm going to just post my email here, and I'll be so happy to talk to you or direct you to the right person. But Stephen, again, thank you so much. It's always mind-blowing and amazing. I have a full page here with all the insights. Faye and Sina, I mean, thank you for trusting us, because you don't really know me or Echoes, but thank you for trusting Stephen. Thank you for trusting us. I think this is huge.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. I am so glad that there is a space for this. It's needed.
Thank you, everyone. It's fun.
Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Paul. Nice seeing you again.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.